Okay. So today we're going to be discussing what we call anarchy medicine. Now, we could also call this Rockefeller medicine or a lot of other things, but we chose anarchy medicine because it sounds intense and kind of catches the eye a little bit. And we're going to talk about living healthy and well around today's corrupt healthcare system. Now, I don't know about you, but I think most would agree, even most of those that are involved in the healthcare system, that we have a corrupt healthcare system. And those that don't are the ones that are probably corrupt and causing it to be corrupt. We're part of the Concerned Doctors group, and during COVID especially, we learned a lot of things, and we're going to be talking about a lot of that today. All right, the original medicine. The use of herbs can be traced back for thousands of years. The history of herbs as medicine has deep roots in tradition and even in rebellion, and it spans continents and economic class systems. Herbalism has a unique way of combining cultural tradition, food, and botanical wellness for everyone. Now, researchers have found evidence of yarrow, chamomile, and poplar on the tooth plaque of Neanderthals dating back to 60,000 BC, and this is evidence that plants have been at the core of nutrition and health since long before recorded history, and we see continued use of plants through the ages. Now, around 1500 BC, the Egyptians created the Herbis Papyrus, a compilation of medical texts that contains over 700 formulas. Despite the age of these papers, the knowledge within is surprisingly advanced. It contains an accurate description of how the human circulatory system works, including the existence of blood vessels and the function of the human heart. Plants mentioned in the Herbis Papyrus include aloe, basil, and bayberry. Now, the ancient Greeks and Romans were also known herbalists. Hippocrates, considered the father of Western medicine, was a famous Greek physician who believed that the body became diseased through natural causes and not by a curse from the gods or superstitious reasoning. Hippocrates spent 20 years in prison for opposing the current ideas of medicine at the time, and while he was in prison, wrote The Complicated Body. Some of the principles in his book still hold true in modern medicine today. Hippocrates used many herbal remedies in his practice and famously wrote, "Let food be thy medicine, and medicine be thy food." One of the botanicals Hippocrates described was willow bark and how it can be utilized for both fevers and for pain, and modern medicine followed up on this in the 1800s when scientists used the active compounds from willow to make aspirin, salicylic acid. The ancient Greeks were also big fans of elderberry, which is popular again for its powerful immune boosting benefits. Now, in China, traditional Chinese medicine is an ancient healing system that is still practiced. TCM is one of the oldest lists of medicinal herbs called Shangbing Kaojing, forgive my pronunciation. The written version of the text was recorded around 250 AD. The Shangbing Kaojing lists healing materials that include minerals, herbs, woods, animals, fruits, and vegetables. Herbs mentioned include modern herbals like ginger, ginseng, reishi mushroom, and mung beans. Now, how about in India? Ayurvedic medicine translates to science of life in Sanskrit. Ayurveda has been traced back to 3300 BC. It integrates practices of yoga, meditation, astrology, and herbalism. Turmeric and holy basil are two really important Ayurvedic herbs. Now, as we travel into the 18th century, the great age of herbalism is said to have occurred from the 15th century to the 17th century. Herbal books were becoming available in English, having been translated from Latin and Greek, and one of the first herbal books to be published ever was Gret Herbal in 1526, and this was preceded by Banks Herbal, which is considered the first English book on herbalism, printed in 1525. A digital scan of Banks Herbal is available online at the U.S. National Library. You can also get it online just by pulling it up on Google. It's worth a look. It mentions rosemary, lavender, mint, and chamomile. Now, this leads us to Nicholas Culpeper, who lived from 1616 to 1654. He was an English herbalist, a botanist, and a physician. He published an extensive book on herbal and pharmacological knowledge called The Complete Herbal. We have some really, really old copies of these. Like Hippocrates, Culpeper was known for being a rebel. He practiced as a people's herbalist during a time when medicine was largely reserved for aristocrats. And this meant that he was scorned by the medical community at the time. Culpeper frowned upon more archaic traditions like bloodletting. Women played, as you can imagine, a key role in herbalism, gaining popularity in the American colonies because women were often called on to collect roots and to care for their families. The plant-based medicine of the Native Americans was key in helping the Europeans adapt to the American terrain. And the role of black, indigenous, and people of color in America must be mentioned when speaking about the continuation of herbalism in the United States. Knowing how to use plants to help support healing was a tradition that was passed among oppressed people in order to gain access to medicine. In the mid-18th century, some states made it illegal for enslaved people to teach or to learn about herbal medicine. Now, one notable black herbalist was Harriet Tubman. How many people knew that Harriet Tubman was an herbalist? Harriet Tubman, who's credited with using her herbal knowledge to aid passengers on the Underground Railroad. Another powerful figure in herbal history is George Washington Carver, an agricultural scientist and prolific inventor. His work on nitrogen-rich plants like soybeans and peanuts, restoring soils, rotating crops, increasing yields, and developing a natural pesticides all made him a pioneer in supporting future herbalism and soil health. Where was he from? Alabama. Roll Tide. The idea of herbalism being a taboo subject appears in history multiple times, from the botanical ties to witchcraft and the Salem witch trials to the way medical students are educated about herbalism. In 1904, the formation of the Council on Medical Education by the American Medical Association, AMA, changed the course of herbalism in America and Canada. The AMA wanted to set specific standards for medical education that had to be met by medical schools. Now, schools that could not meet their standards were shut down, and between 1910 and 1935, listen to this, more than half of American medical schools either merged with large universities or were closed. Half of them. These schools were not allowed to offer training in homeopathy, naturopathy, chiropractic, or osteopathic practice because that would cause them to lose their accreditation, which was necessary for survival. Look at this guy. You know who that is? Yeah. What is Rockefeller medicine? Western medicine has some good points, and it's great in an emergency, but the majority of mainstream medicine, Western medicine or allopathy, with its focus on drugs and radiation, surgery, and then more drugs, is at its foundation a money-spinning Rockefeller creation. We said that. People these days look at you like a weirdo if you talk about the healing properties of plants or any other holistic practices. Much like anything else, politics and money have been used to warp people's minds and to encourage them to embrace what is bad for them. It all began with John D. Rockefeller, 1839 to 1937, who is an oil magnate, America's first billionaire, and a natural-born monopolist. Now listen to this. How many did you know that his father, William Avery Rockefeller, was a traveling snake oil salesman who posed as a deaf-mute peddler? He hawked miracle drugs and herbal remedies. The smooth-talking huckster was dubbed Devil Bill, alternately fathering children, including the future industrialist with his wife and mistress, the couple's live-in housekeeper. William Rockefeller also lived a double life, posing as an eye and ear specialist named Dr. William Livingston, and in 1855 he secretly married another woman. So that's where we get Rockefeller, huh? Here we have a Wikipedia basically saying, you know, all the same things that I just said, except it also mentions that he loaned money to farmers at 12%, but tried to lend to farmers who could not pay so as to foreclose to take the farms. In other words, a scoundrel. Now, by the turn of the 20th century, John D. Rockefeller controlled 90% of all U.S. oil refineries through his oil company, Standard Oil, which was later on broken up to become Chevron, Exxon, Mobil, etc. That's the evolution of Standard Oil. At the same time, around 1900, scientists discovered petrochemicals and the ability to create all kinds of chemicals from oil. For example, the first plastic, called Bakelite, was made from oil in 1907. Scientists were discovering various vitamins and guessed that many pharmaceutical drugs could be made from oil. This was a wonderful opportunity for Rockefeller, who saw the ability to monopolize the oil, chemical, and the medical industries at the same time. Let's not forget about education. The best thing about petrochemicals was that everything could be patented and sold for high profits, but there was one problem with Rockefeller's plan for the medical industry. Natural herbal remedies were very popular in America at the time, and almost half the doctors in medical colleges in the United States were practicing holistic medicine using knowledge from Europe and Native Americans. How many medicines are petroleum-based? 99% of pharmaceuticals contain petrochemicals today. 99%. They either have them or come from them. Now he went to his buddy Andrew Carnegie, who made his money from monopolizing the steel industry, and they devised a scheme. from the prestigious Carnegie Foundation, they sent a man named Abraham Flexner to travel around the country and report on the status of medical colleges and hospitals around the country. This led to the Flexner Report, which gave birth to the modern medicine as we know it. In 1908, the AMA's CME proposed to the Carnegie Foundation a study on medical education. Because this was all in the name of education, right? Not money. Oh, here's where it's basically racist, the Flexner Report, and it talks about his writings being racist and so forth. The report talked about the need for revamping and centralizing our medical institutions. Based on this report, more than half of all medical colleges were soon closed. Homeopathy and natural medicines were mocked and demonized, and doctors were even jailed for using alternative practices. To help with the transition and change the minds of other doctors and scientists, Rockefeller gave more than $100 million to colleges, hospitals, and founded a group called the General Education Board, GEB. In a very short time, medical colleges were all streamlined, and all the students were learning the same thing, and all of medicine was about using patented drugs. There you have it. That's how it started. Scientists received huge grants to study how plants cured diseases, but their goal was to first identify which chemicals in the plant were effective, and then recreate a similar chemical, but not identical, in the lab that could be patented. A pill for an ill became the mantra for modern medicine. And now, over 100 years later, we have doctors who know very little about the benefit of nutrition or herbs or any holistic practices unless they go out and learn them on their own. We have an entire society that is enslaved to corporations for its well-being. America spends over $4 trillion yearly on health care, also known as sick care, and it's focused not on the cure, but on symptoms, thus creating repeat customers. There's no cure for cancer, there's no cure for diabetes, autism, asthma, or even the flu. So all this is trucking along, right? They've won. If you can't beat them, then buy them. But they haven't even had to buy us yet because they're beating us. They've discredited natural medicine. But what is the German Commission E? Has anybody heard about the German Commission E? This is really cool. So in the 90s, let's look here. The Commission E formed in 1978. They published during the 90s 380 monographs evaluating the safety and efficacy of herbs for licensed medical prescribing in Germany. The monographs were published between 1984 and 1994, and they've not been updated since, but they're still considered extremely valid. Now, here's what happened. The German E Commission was founded. They basically, which once again, who argues with German science, right? They come out with all of these plants that actually do have effectiveness in medicine. They do have clinical trials. They are effective. They've been proven. That doesn't really bode well for the pharmaceutical companies, and our education here in the United States has been saying this stuff is snake oil. This stuff is like what, Rockefeller's dad was putting out back, during the 1800s. This discredited what they were saying, and they didn't like it. So, what are they going to do about the Commission E, and what are they going to do about herbs now that they literally have clinical studies on herbs showing that they're effective? Well, if you can't beat them, buy them. So look at all these herb companies on the outer wall of this, we'll call this a cell. Look at the outer wall of the cell there. You have Wobenzyme, you have Schiff, and you have Country Life and Nature's Way and Cal and Solar Ray and Emergency and Megafood and Nature Made and Ester C and all these different companies, right? Look who actually owns the companies, right? 14 companies own all of these supplement companies, and there's more since then. Since this picture, this illustration was done, there's more since then. How many people know that Pfizer over there, who owns Centrum, Emergency, and Caltrate, they actually own a company called Capsugel. Capsugel is the largest distributor, largest supplier of capsules to the entire dietary supplement industry. Capsugel puts out basically, I would say 80%, probably 85% of all the capsules that you see at every health food store, every Vitamin World, every GNC. Those capsules were made by a company called Capsugel. Guess who owns Capsugel? Pfizer. If you can't beat them, buy them. So now Pfizer gets to supply all of these supplement companies that put out these supplements that go against, in some ways, every fabric of everything they supposedly believe in, but it doesn't matter because they're making bank on it. Now, for us to get capsules that aren't from Pfizer, it costs us, what, about 30% more to not have to buy from Capsule Gel, to buy from other sources other than Capsule Gel. But all of these companies are owned, by these companies in the middle: Bayer, Clorox, Procter & Gamble, Nestle, Pfizer, the Carlyle Group. Now, I wanted to figure out a little more, though. Who owns these companies? Who owns the 14 companies in the middle, right? That's weird. There it is. Who owns those 14 companies, right? This gets fun. Now, these are kind of hard to see. These are the top 10 shareholders of Clorox: Vanguard, BlackRock. Top 10 shareholders of Procter & Gamble: Vanguard. Top 10 shareholders of Procter & Gamble, Vanguard. Is that BlackRock down there, I think? Top 10 shareholders of Procter & Gamble, let's see here. Carlyle Group, Vanguard, BlackRock. Nestle, Vanguard, BlackRock. Pfizer, Vanguard, BlackRock. Reckitt Beckensons, Vanguard. BlackRock. Oh, here's where the director of HGGC was formerly the BlackRock director of alternative specialist there at BlackRock. Here's Kikkoman, Vanguard, BlackRock. Now look at this. You dig a little deeper. Who owns Vanguard Rockefeller? Well, that's weird. Why'd they call it Vanguard Rockefeller? Here's where you have Vanguard Rockefeller Capital Management increasing its ownership of Vanguard. So here's the weird part. Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Who owns those three? Well, in part, Vanguard's owned by BlackRock. BlackRock's owned by Vanguard. These are all private equity firms where billionaires and people who control the majority of the world put their money to control various companies. And sure, they buy into these companies, and they may only own 9%, 8%. But if you own 8%, if you own 9%, guess what? You're a chief shareholder, and you have more input in what that company does, the culture of the company. Have you noticed how some companies like Starbucks has sort of a, sort of a culture that a lot of people don't agree with, and how certain companies like Chipotle and other companies seem like they're woke, or they have a certain agenda that doesn't really seem normal for a company to be focused on? That's because everything you're seeing in the media, everything that you're eating, everything that you're wearing, the cars that you're driving, every option. And what is Dollar General? Dollar General, where we live, there's literally a Dollar General on every single corner. You can roll into a town, there'll be nothing open except they'll have a Mason Hall and they'll have a Dollar General. You know what I'm saying? Don't get me started on either one. But the Dollar Generals, of course, Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street owned. The products they sell are all Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street owned. Have you noticed that there's not a single healthy thing to eat at a Dollar General? Nothing. It's almost as if they're intentionally poisoning people. Why is that? Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. Who owns Merck, who makes Keytruda, the world's most popular chemotherapy drug? Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. So what a racket, right? You discredit natural medicine for a century. Then when natural medicine proves itself even outside of your control, you say, okay, well, we're just going to buy up the industry. So you buy up the industry. Now you own the dietary supplement industry for the most part, but you also own the food. You own Nestle, you own Pfizer, you own Clorox, you own all these various companies that produce this horrible food, right? The toxic food, the bioengineered food. That food then sends you to the doctor, who then sends you to the pharmacy to buy more products from Vanguard, BlackRock, State Street. It's the best racket, the most efficient racket that's ever been conceived. And it's done all through capitalism, and it's done all through the fact that these companies are owned and manipulated and controlled through evil people and entities. And you're the victim. So is Vanguard the richest company in the world? Vanguard has, this is in 2022, I think it's 24 trillion now. At the time, it was $8 trillion that it managed. BlackRock is owned by Rockefeller Capital Management, right? For $76 million. That was back in 2023. What's interesting too, look at this quote. John D. Rockefeller literally is quoted as saying, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers," right? It's manipulation, and it's manipulation at its finest. Now here, what do? How do we protect our health and our families? Well, the first thing is you identify your enemy, right? If you're going to go into battle, you need to know who your enemy is. Who's the enemy? Well, identify the enemy. Stop eating the foods provided by the same companies providing the drugs and medications to treat the illnesses caused by the food that they're feeding you. Let me say that again. Stop eating the foods provided by the same companies that are providing the drugs and medications to treat the illnesses that are caused by the food they're feeding you. Stop the cycle. Now look at this chart. Look at how awful this is. Look at there we have Nestle again. There you have, just a few companies, and look at the companies that they own. Look at PepsiCo. You think Coca-Cola and Pepsi, you think that Pepsi won or that Coca-Cola won against Pepsi? No, look at all the things that PepsiCo owns other than just a soft drink. Look at these companies. All right, so how do we do this? How do we get out of the system? How do we do anarchy medicine? Well, how about growing your own herbs as much as you can? And if you don't grow them, co-op it. Find other people that have soil that's adequate for the type of herbs that you want to have, that they want to have. Figure out who needs to grow what. We do it with your family, do it with your friends. As much food as possible, grow your own food. Buy from farmers markets. Visit the Mennonite and Amish communities for meat and produce. I know there's some Amish folks, I think, near here. I don't know if we're going to get time. I guess today's the only day we could have went. Okay, so we're not going to get to visit the Amish today, but we went yesterday to Middlebury, Indiana. We stopped off there to visit with the Mennonites. It's strange for us because we have Amish who live different, or like really intense down in Tennessee, not far from where we live, and then we have Mennonites down there who live a little different than the Amish. Here, the people that say they're Amish live a little bit more like Mennonites live where we're from. But it's really cool though, because the Mennonites have they have a pretty good idea about health, about clean foods, and a lot of them are coming out with markets where they don't use inorganic chemicals, and they're a lot cleaner with their food. Yes, sir.
Well, there's a big issue now in Pennsylvania where they're actually prosecuting an Amish farmer who has developed a good sales system for his organic beef and his pork, and also for his grain setting.
Right.
And they're trying to eliminate it.
Oh yeah, it's as they become more popular. We have an area in Alabama called Section, Alabama, and a big group of Mennonites moved from Tennessee. I guess they couldn't get along, but they moved from their area. They moved down to Section and started a whole new community. And they have something called the Section Farm Market that is a great source. They're really neat. You go into their place and they'll have a blue label and a white label. And the blue label is what? Pesticides? They use some chemicals. And the white label is organic, completely organic. And then they'll of course tell you what chemicals they're using. Most of the time they're inert or very, very, very non-toxic. But dealing with these groups can definitely help when it comes to keeping your home healthy, because the farmers markets. We went to a farmers market in St. Augustine a few weeks ago, and we're blown away because it was just a farmers market, but actually it may as well have been an organic market. The majority of people there were making organics, organic bread, organic all kind of things that you really can't find easily at the grocery store.
Years ago, if I may, I was involved with my mentor and soil scientist.
Okay.
And there was a group of Mennonites Amish that came from Pennsylvania to Indiana, where I live.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up buying a couple of farms down in the place where I had some research. They knew more about soils than I did. I was totally amazed. But
Wow.
they knew exactly what they wanted terms of landscape and all that,
Wow.
to do the farming that they wanted. And it was very impressive how broad their knowledge is.
Right. They had, what, maybe an eighth grade education.
All the way up.
Yeah, eighth grade education, but they knew more about what. Well, I mean, if you want to know about horses, dogs, cattle, or soil, hey, an Amish, or about hard work, they know how to work, and a lot about life too. They're pretty impressive folks. Another thing you can do is to start a natural medicine chest. There are a lot of things that you can keep at home, and that are very effective, very important to keep at home, to keep in good dry or cool place. Your essential oils, they keep very well. Orange oil, frankincense, lavender, tea tree, peppermint, they all have a multitude of uses, both externally, internally, to help with pest control naturally and several other things. Starting a tincture collection. Tinctures last for years, alcohol tinctures. And to start a collection is a pretty neat idea, just of all the plants that you want to use, that you might use. Things like cayenne, valerian, beetroot, reishi mushroom, ashwagandha, lobelia, turmeric, hawthorn, goldensil, olive leaf, comfrey. To us, those are some of the most important ones because they're, having kids or just living in general. I mean, having valerian on hand for sleep to help calm the nerves, having things like cayenne there for heart problems and heart issues. Also having antiparasitics, like our last discussion after that, most people are going to want to have something like black walnut, cloves, wormwood, black seed oil. Those are all really good to keep on hand. P77 and P73, which is antiviral. Having an antiviral stash is really important. Elderberry, colloidal silver is a good one to have. Obviously, colloidal silver, these keep for long periods of time if you store them in the right way. Probiotics, a whole food multivitamin or green food supplement. Neti pots. Does everybody know what a neti pot is? Like a nasal rinse. Those are handy to have. Ear candles. Those are something that they'll keep forever, for a long, long time. Just don't squish them. Tommy Bath salve. You can get that from Daryl, or from someone who gets it from Daryl. Tommy Bath salve is wonderful, or a salve that's like it. That's kind of a multi-use salve that you can use on open sores or anything. And then the environmental defense system, which we use for the pesticides, we use for the PFAs in the water, and for all the different chemicals that we're being attacked with and bombarded with. That's why we have so many of these autoimmune disorders today. Some of these oddball disorders that didn't exist 50 years ago is because of the plastics, because of the pesticides. How about filtering your water? Look at this chart. It's pretty bad. Now, I don't know, in the area in Michigan, is that here? It's almost here. It may be a little north. Is it really? That's just it's just being kind there. Well, you notice that the PFAs sort of follow the Rust Belt, and then down in Alabama, we get hit with everything. Look, it just covers our region, the entire region of where we run and play, and exist.
Some of that, at least as I'm aware from Michigan,
Uh-huh.
is some testing bias too, because we hit a period where it became a very covered topic, and that prompted testing to be done
Right.
pretty much statewide.
And because Michigan, well, look, that's what happened. Look at your tap water over there on the right side.
Most states have not done that.
Right, and they've started it down. If you look in Alabama, it's literally everywhere pretty much that are our stomping grounds. But look up in Michigan, you guys, because of, like you said, the testing, you're showing way more. Whereas out west, you see hardly anything because there's these water supplies out there aren't as concerned with it.
Would that be in well water?
Oh yeah, definitely.
The EPA is doing several studies right now, because I was involved in one in Indiana. It's a rural system where they're just basically going out to farms and doing well water analysis. It's everywhere.
Yeah.
Well, and government offices in Michigan have been tested, most of them, not all. And we have done some moderately extensive wildlife testing.
Yeah. Well, it's a mess, and there's a place called Fruithurst or Muscadine, Alabama, and it's out in the middle of nowhere. It's out in the country. All they had was a Tyson chicken, and then some tire company. But just because it was all the well water, and because there's some aquifer that runs right under where the tire company was, people started developing all these strange birth defects, cancers, infertility. They started testing and they found out that that's what it was, but then they covered it up. We're in an area called Oxford, Alabama, where our main location is, and Oxford's right next door to Anniston, Alabama. Anniston, Alabama, and Oxford have 4 EPA Superfund sites within a 10-mile radius of each other. Tool Chemical Company that makes Compound 1080. It's a toxic chemical that is only used in 2 or 3 countries in the entire world, and this is the only place that's allowed to sell them. The Anniston Army Depot, which is had a chemical weapons incinerator. Fort McClellan, which was a chemical weapons training facility, and then Monsanto was actually there, and it was the Monsanto location that actually had to pay out 20,000 checks. They had to pay 20,000 people for the PCB contaminations that they not only caused but also hid and were caught hiding, and so it was one of the only rulings, or it was actually, I think, the first major ruling against Monsanto in the United States, the court system. But look at the water systems. Look at the water. Yeah, this is a global chart of groundwater, contamination by pesticides, and this is by pesticides. And look at the saturation. And there's so much of an area. I'm trying to look at Peru. It doesn't look as bad.
Is that groundwater or surface water?
Fresh water contamination.
So combined.
Yeah. 1/3 of U.S. community water systems violated the Safe Drinking Water Act. These are the areas. Of course, that's also a matter of testing, like you said. Some places just aren't testing, so they're not showing as much. One of the things that we do, nearly 77 million people got water from these supplies. And it's making people sick. It's giving people cancer. Here's this. I've taken several sips of this while we've been doing this. This is a Lark water bottle. You'd think that we rep for this company or something, or that we sell them, but we don't. Look at that filter. That's one of the few filters that you'll find that's in water bottles that will not only do bacteria and viruses, but also do the PFAs, the plastics, and the pesticides. It's wonderful. This water bottle has been dropped a few times. It's been almost dropped in the Amazon a few times. It's been to the Amazon several times. It took a toenail of my wife's off for a year. That's another story. She was at a plant shop, and she's standing there and just absolutely is talking, and she just drops it from right here directly on her big toe, right? And once again, she's wearing sandals, and it's on concrete. So her toenail fell off in the Amazon. We were literally in the water, in our creek, right before it dumps in the Amazon. We were in our pool. We call it our swimming pool. And literally, she's like, I think my toenail just fell off. And so it took a solid year. Now, her toenail, to me now, is very beautiful. She didn't know if it was going to grow back or not, but you would think she would never want to go back to the Amazon. She's had malaria one time. She had a toenail fall off. But anyway, you can actually see me with my water bottle. See the same water bottle. We're on our bridge there, and the Amazon River is, on the right side of that bridge is where the creek dumps into the Amazon. And so I want to go back. We'll be back, in 2 weeks? Anyway. All right, you ready for the next water filter? The one for home use? All right, we like the zero water filters. Why? Because they filter out 100% of everything. They give you a water tester. When you take that water and you put it in the zero water into your cup, and you take that tester, you put it in, it says 0.00. You take that same water tester and you use it on tap water, it's going to say 150 parts per million of contaminants, or heavy metals, or elements in general. Now, there's controversy in that, because some people say, well, if you're making your water have zero particulate, that means that you're not getting the enzymes, you're not getting the minerals and the trace minerals that you need to be getting in your water. True. That's the reason we get our trace minerals and we get our minerals from food. We don't really need to necessarily be getting them from water, unless, of course, you're seeking that out. There's too much possibility of getting elements and heavy metals in your water if you're consistently drinking it, if you're getting it from water that has those elements in it and it hasn't been filtered. Zero water puts it down to nothing. That way, that if you want to add minerals or add electrolytes to it, or whatever you might want to do, you can. But that's, once again, that's you that control what you consume, rather than somebody else or some other company or some other entity doing it. I know we come from an area, I was born in an area called Gadsden, Alabama. And Gadsden, Alabama sued 3M Corporation for their PFAs in their water. They had very high PFA contamination in their water. They sued and they won. They won a settlement, and part of the settlement was 3M was to give them 9 of these huge filters. I mean, they're as high as this building, they're as big around as those 2 doors, and there's 9 of these filters that sit up. And Gasman's very, very impressed with them. The city put up lights shining on them at night, so when you drive by the waterworks, it looks like, I mean, these things are fancy, right? So they have these 9 water filtration systems, you know, to get all the PFAs out of the water, and guess what? It's still over the EPA's new minimum requirements in plastics, PFAs, in their water, even with the addition of those 9 filters. So filtering it yourself, taking that into your own hands is a good idea. All right, what about finding alternative healthcare sources? This is the one where our medical doctors who are in here sometimes get a little edgy. Establish a relationship with an online pharmacy and know their address for when the internet is no longer available. Does that sound a little crazy? Have you heard these commercials for Hims and for Hers? You know what that really is? They're saying, okay, if you need hair replacement products or medications to help with your anxiety, you know, give us a call. It's a place where you call them, right? And you tell them what's wrong with you, and they put you on the phone with a doctor, right? This is, of course, going to be someone who's, you know, probably has a 2.0 out of 5 stars, you know, on the Google reviews for their primary care facility. They have the physician then prescribe you whatever it is you want. So basically, you just call them and then they put you on the medications that you asked for. Does that sound safe? No. But it's not a bad idea to find a alternative healthcare source, an online pharmacy, and, you know, so that you can access things like antibiotics, and you can be able to get access to certain things that you have knowledge about or that you have experience with. Use caution and care, but Google and other search engines can be a useful tool for health information. You can find symptom guides that can be helpful for diagnosis when a physician is not available. However, great caution needs to be used for obvious reasons. What's another thing that you can do? Well, one of the other things too, we were talking about books earlier, and old herb books. It's kind of funny, me and Daryl will oftentimes on eBay compete, we'll be bidding against each other on some of these old herb books. And every once in a while he'll be like, hey, let me get this one, you know, and I'll be like, okay. And so these old books can be a wealth of knowledge. That's just like we bought a 2022 World Book Encyclopedia set for our kids. We want to, you know, actually have a physical encyclopedia set for our kids for, you know, if in the case that there is no internet. I'd hate to be the only, you know, place around that has no knowledge about anything. You know, we need references, and so we try to have as many references as we can. Some of these important books to have are Mountain Medicine by this guy named Daryl Patton. Notice I put that one first. Prescription for Nutritional Healing. No one mentioned that book, but it's not really a quote-unquote herb book, but it's by a couple. Actually, they've both passed away, but it was Phyllis Balk and James Balk. Yeah, there were several editions. I think at least 6 editions. But getting an edition of that, it's a very thick book, but it contains a lot of information, not only about herbs, but about vitamins, about minerals, about foods that you can use for different ailments, and it has a kind of an A to Z ailment guide in it. It's really good. Then Today's Herbal Health, which is a very simple book, but I like it because of its simplicity, by Louise Tenney. And then Back to Eden, which was mentioned earlier in our little round table, by Jethro Kloss. And World Without Cancer, that's a great book to have while you can still get it. It was banned and then taken out of publication for a while, but that talks about the story of B17 or Laetrile and for cancer therapy. And then also the Peterson Field Guide to Medicinal Plants and Herbs. Oh, there's a little picture of it you added. That's a great one because it actually has a color-coded, you know, little search tool so you can identify some plants on your own easily. Avoid DNA testing and dangerous drugs and procedures. Think about all these folks. You heard about this Ancestry.com and, you know, these folks that were taking and getting their DNA, and then not long after they were acquired, no, that's not it. Long after they were acquired by this Blackstone, there was a big leak. And so all these people's DNA information was leaked. Now, what do you think companies or these entities can do when they have literally your DNA information? It's really spooky. So I would not give my DNA to anyone. I wouldn't even give my animal's DNA to anyone. We care too much about our dog. Now here's talking about the serious adverse events and special interests following mRNA COVID-19 vaccination in randomized trials in adults. Now it's kind of a no-brainer. One way that you would possibly be a wise way to get out of the system is to not take the system's shots. If it's unapproved, even if it is approved by our health agencies, if you can't understand and or know what's in something, should you really be consuming it? You know, I know people who won't eat foods that have bioengineered food ingredients, right? But then they'll take a shot with Lord knows what in it. And I don't understand that. You're literally saying, I trust Rockefeller Healthcare. I trust it with my life. And no wise person ever said that. Yes, sir?
What is the reason, and I think this started in the 30s or 40s, that they were using mercury or aluminum for the adjuvants to put into these? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to make the immune system respond to?
Well,
They're basically giving us poison.
the heavy metal, the mercury now is mainly in the multi-dose vials. And they do it as something that will keep and preserve those, supposedly. But they're finding ingredients. As being part of the Concerned Doctors group, we get to hear about a lot of things that these physicians are kind of saying under their breath and talking about kind of behind closed doors. During COVID, we had people that, we discussed that in one of our discussions, that people that literally went from being an atheist to becoming agnostic simply because they saw the evil that was occurring in medicine. And they said if that level of evil, unbridled evil, in other words, it's not about greed, it literally reeks of nothing but evil. And that if there's evil to that degree, then there has to be good to that degree. And they basically became agnostic and part of this more or less Christian, Judeo-Christian group of doctors and physicians called the Concerned Doctors group. And there is so much evil going on right now. We don't like to be conspiracy theorists or people that really, jump on every bandwagon. The 5G thing, we're not on that yet. But the fluoride in the water thing. Now I heard people complaining for decades about fluoride in the water and how fluoridation was causing people to have, pineal glands that were calcified and so forth. And literally today, you can find the studies that prove that theory to be true. It's not just a theory anymore. The fact is they add fluoride to the water, and the fact is fluoride does cause calcification of the pineal gland. And the truth is that people who have pineal glands that are calcified have a very hard time of being spiritual or having a connection to God, so to speak. So, it's hard not to be a conspiracy theorist a little bit when you start seeing the conspiracy theories. That whole thing about weather modification that people made fun of? These weather modification freaks, they think so-and-so. Well, guess what they admit to now? The NOAA Weather Service has a page devoted to weather modification. And the fact is, they've been modifying the weather for the past 40 years. Since the people have been talking about it. So, not to be a quote-unquote conspiracy theorist, but to be someone who's simply watching, what do they call it, watchtower, guardians of the watchtower, they call it something under the people who are aware of things that are kind of going on around them. And it's to a point now where we have to detach somewhat. To be able to think clearly, you have to pull yourself out of the box sometimes and to look at it from a perspective of wisdom. And people aren't doing that. So now what? Focus on the future. Independence in healthcare. Take control of our minds and our lives. Do new research. Go out and do it. Don't wait on someone else to do it. I think that's that's almost like the theme of this Michigan Herb Conference is go out and do something. Quit waiting around for someone else to discover something. Go do it yourself. That's what we had to do. I simply wanted to know why on earth are people not microdosing ayahuasca. That's the only reason we went to the jungle. I just wanted to know from the shaman, or if we could get to know somebody close enough to find out, do they microdose ayahuasca? And sure enough, they do. First person we met, Jaime, 63-year-old shaman, says, I drink it every day. Almost every day. And we're like, well, there's the answer. Why didn't anybody ask that question beforehand? Well, the reason is the shaman down there, they want you to come down and stay for a week and pay them $1,000, or pay them hundreds of dollars for their treatment. They don't want people just easily microdosing it. But sometimes you just got to go out and do things. And then once we did that, now we're neck deep in the Amazon to the point that I don't even like the heat. Today's beautiful. This is my kind of day outside here. This is my kind of weather. But it's what we're supposed to be doing right now. Go back to old text and books for clues and start utilizing the knowledge that existed before clinical trials and Rockefeller medicine began. And you cannot change the global healthcare system, but you can totally change the healthcare system within your home and your life. And there is no wellness in sick care. Now, the one before last, you cannot change the global healthcare system, but you can totally change the healthcare system within your home and your life. Think about that when it comes to almost any aspect. Get your home straight. Get your life straight. Take at least your family in your own home. Take that and start with that. You can't change the world. You can't go out and modify this system. They'll off you. It's like most people don't even remember. There was a guy who worked for the CDC about 1 year before COVID hit. He committed suicide by drowning himself in Atlanta. One of those suicides by drowning. And literally no one asked a question. His family asked plenty of questions, but the media just gobbled it up. 1 year later, we have COVID-19. This guy was high level with CDC. It's really, really spooky. But, we live in an age where we're bombarded with the wrong ideas. The media, of course, is controlled by the same people and owned by the same people who own all those companies that we just showed you. So they're not going to tell you any different. So, the best thing to do is to take as much as you can do on your own, learn on your own. Find a group of people like this one. These conference people are awesome. We have a ball just running around to these different ones and to just meeting people. And so many of them are into various parts and have their own little specialties. Emily doesn't do the same thing that we do. She does in some ways, but she does it her way. But we can learn from her. She can learn from us. There's so many different people, and it's neat too because so many different people. It gives you the opportunity to find people that you mesh with. And you might start one direction in natural medicine, and then you'll end up a totally different place by the time you're in it for a few years. But no one's an expert. No one that's up here as teachers are experts. We're just people that have niches and passion about certain things. And so Daryl has his niches and passions, and Emily has hers. We have ours, and that's why we do these things. Any questions or comments?